Entrepreneurship is one of the environments with the highest level of stress. So the stress needs to go somewhere.
A lot of individuals, especially in the West, develop an internalized sense of shame towards their sense of self. And it's from that internalized sense of shame that we then develop sexual shame. Whether it was explicit or implicitly communicated that sex is bad, all of a sudden, especially as teenage boys, we got all this testosterone flooding in our system, and we start to feel confused about it because it becomes coupled with guilt, fear, and shame.
The first thing that's here is I pretty much used it as a mechanism to release stress. I was basically seeking sex outside of my relationship. That helped me to get through my entrepreneurial journey, but as we said at the beginning, it's completely disconnected.
It creates a split in our psyche that communicates to us, these things are good, these things are bad.
The maximum level of stress you can experience and pressure you can put on yourself is having investors on board. Stress that I've had in my career went through the roof as well. I think there needs to be this commitment to listen to each other with compassion and understanding. That in turn requires work with the nervous system. It requires self-awareness. It requires an understanding of the mind and everything. There was like a progression. It started with porn. Porn turned into using this live webcam, and that eventually then led into escort dates.
Welcome to the Heart of Man podcast, a podcast for any man seeking to live in alignment with his deepest core and lead a life of profound meaning and connection. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and I'm here to empower you through transformative conversations, eye-opening insights, and practical wisdom. Join me now as we venture into the heart of man. Let's dive in. How does a man build a relationship with his sexuality that feels integral and aligned with who he truly is? What does it take for founders and high performers to move from secrecy, compulsion, or shame into a place of integrity and emotional clarity in their intimate lives? Welcome back to this episode of the Founders Series, a 6-part journey supporting founders, business professionals, and high-performing men who want to evolve from high-functioning stress into embodied and integrated leadership, a form of leadership that allows you to stay clear and calm under pressure by aligning who you are with how you lead. In this conversation, Bjoern and I explore a subject many founders wrestle with quietly, often in isolation. We look at how within the entrepreneurial world, many men carry internal conflict, shame, or secrecy around their sexuality. For many founders and leaders, the harder they chase external achievements at the cost of themselves and their relationships, the more disconnected they consequently become from their emotional life, their needs, and their deeper self. We explore how early conditioning shapes a man's relationship with desire, how messages about what is acceptable or unacceptable create shame, suppression, and a split identity, and how so many men end up performing as the good man who holds everything together, yet have no place for the parts of themselves they learn to hide, leading to secrecy, acting out, and further disconnection. We also look at why this hits founders particularly hard: the high levels of responsibility, the constant stressors, the pressure to succeed, the loneliness beneath success, and the emotional disconnection that comes with a life built around performance. We discuss porn, not to debate whether it's good or bad, but to show how frequent use often becomes a way to regulate emotional overwhelm or soothe the nervous system, turning into a predictable escape from loneliness or pressure. As a result, many men become hypersexual, yet deeply under-intimate, craving nurturance, but having no model to receive it. From here, we explore how many men can repattern their sexuality in a practical way, with both Bjoern and I sharing honestly from our own journeys. We look at how to own desire without shame, how to integrate the parts of ourselves we were taught to reject, and how to become comfortable with our sexual charge so we can bring it into a relationship consciously and with integrity. At its core, this episode is about transforming the way we relate to our sexuality as men. It's a journey of reclaiming the potency sexuality holds and integrating it into your life in a grounded and aligned way. It is about maturing in the places where unhealed parts still drive the show, taking responsibility for your shadows, and bringing more clarity, depth, and safety into your intimate life and into your leadership, allowing you to feel more peace, more passion, and more potency. If you're a man who feels confused, ashamed, or disconnected from your desire, or you long to live with more sexual integrity, confidence, and truth, this episode is for you. All right, Bjoern, my friend,
Hey,
Good to have you back on the show. How are you doing today?
very well. Thank you. Suffering a bit from the heat, but otherwise doing well.
For reference for all our listeners, rainy season is really coming fully online right now, and we've definitely noticed a significant shift within the temperature and the humidity over last week, and it's been brutal, man. I've definitely as well noticed that myself. Well, listen, man, I'm super excited to have you here again on the show for today, and especially because of the subject matter that we'll be addressing. And I noticed as well that this is a super tender one for me, and one that is incredibly meaningful to me. And I as well know, based on your history, based on as well the growth that you've gone through, also very important to you. And what I really want to cover with you is essentially the frame of sexuality.
Mm.
And perhaps to go a little bit deeper into it, more some of the challenges that can occur when that circuit or that circuitry of our sexuality is not fully dialed in, and how it can leak out in unhealthy ways. This might be in sexual compulsion, this might be in sex addiction, this might be infidelity, this might be porn, this might be sexual repression. There's all kinds of different ways of how that can play out. And I for sure have had my own fair share of experiences of that in my life. And I've come to recognize the incredible pain that I've as well had to go through when that was the case. But then as well, on the other side, I've also experienced the incredible beauty and the miracle that sexuality can be when two individuals can come together consensually and be in a win-win dynamic where both individuals really want that, right? So that's essentially been my experience. And from my understanding as well, like, this has been very much yours, and you've as well referenced in our first podcast together, some of the challenges that you had gone through, such as infidelity, such as porn, such as, sexual compulsion, let's say. So this is where I'd really want us to frame this conversation. So perhaps we can begin, for any of the listeners that haven't yet listened to the previous conversations of you, perhaps you can just give individuals a bit of a sense of how this occurred for you. You don't have to share so much of the entire scope of what happened, but perhaps some understandings of how this played out for you. And from there, we can expand forwards.
So yeah, for for background, I've been a serial entrepreneur for all of my life basically. Started building companies very early, and then went down an entrepreneurial journey. And especially during the time I was building my last company, which eventually was quite successful. At peak times, we're leading 300 people and like had quite a big exit in the end for a couple of hundred millions. And in that time, that's where, let's say, there was the peak of what I would call unhealthy relationship to sex kind of like happened for me. And we're going to dive into that deeper, right? But the first thing that's here is like I pretty much used it as a mechanism to release stress. So I was basically seeking sex outside of my relationship, and I was watching porn a couple of times a day, and that helped me to get through my entrepreneurial journey. But as you said at the beginning, it was completely dysfunctional.
Yeah.
It was completely disconnected. It had nothing to do with love and connection. And it primarily was, a stress release mechanism, I would say.
A follow-up question on that. When you were going through those cycles, when you noticed like the enactment of such behaviors, what was that like for you? Did you feel somewhat trapped in that? Was it something that you didn't really question at the time? How was that for you?
Yeah. I would say my capacity to actually question that simply wasn't there, because like what would I have opened up by looking at it and looking at like what's really happening here would have been way too painful.
Right.
So I didn't really look at it.
Yeah.
At the time. I was like engaging in these things. And what it gave me was freedom. Freedom from responsibility, freedom from demand, a sense of aliveness, and a sense of basically tuning out of my head.
So I want to point out here as well for our listeners how genuine and how innocent these desires are, right? So the behavior itself might have been dysfunctional, quote
Yeah.
unquote, and might have caused a lot of harm towards yourself and others. But at the same time, the need itself was incredibly innocent.
Yeah.
You just didn't know how to access it another way, right? And so here's the framing as well that I want to bring in, just to really elicit as well some compassion, because I believe a lot of listeners can listen into this. Some might even be able to recognize themselves in all of that. And perhaps it can also elicit shame, which is understandable. And I think it's also one of the more insidious things about sexuality and shame, that the more shame we have, the more it actually perpetuates the cycle.
Oh yeah, big time. Like, yeah, I can totally relate to that. Let's say the deeper I got into that, the more shame there was, and then the bigger the next experience needed to be to actually cope with the shame that was created by the last experience, right? And I can also say that there was like a progression. Like, started with porn.
Yeah.
Porn turned into like using this kind of like live webcam kind of stuff, and that eventually then led into escort dates and stuff.
Would you say because the stimulus that you initially received, let's just say through porn, was very satisfying at the beginning, but the more you went in, perhaps more pain you experienced, the higher the impulse needed to be for you to experience the same sense of aliveness,
Yeah.
same sense of freedom, same sense of like liberation from all the woes and responsibilities you had?
Yeah, I think it was like an okay, say that. So while that clearly happened, also the level of intensity and stress that I felt in my career went through the roof as well. So let's say the tools I were using weren't as effective anymore, while the stress became even higher.
Yeah.
And
What was it at the time that made it more stressful? Was it the growth of the company or?
yeah, expectations on myself that I put on myself, but also expectations from others. It's simply reality that like the moment one works with, let's say, yeah, you're a solo founder of your company, you own it 100%, then you only have to deal with the stress that you put on yourself, basically, which is already quite a lot for most people. Maybe then there are expectations from your employees at some point, right? So that's another like group that generates demand for a founder. The maximum level of stress you can experience and pressure you can put on yourself is like having investors on board as well, because they will come in with like pretty high expectations.
Sure.
For them to like, for you to actually increase the money that they put into the company significantly. So all of that happened at the same time. And yes, with the growth of the company, I mean, we went from like 0 to 300 people in not even like 5 years. I think it was 4 years or something like that. So with that, the workload increased as well. While, let's say, the impact of the experience of using porn became less effective. Right? And with that, there was then a need for like an even more intense experience. I would have to say that like, if I would have known, let's say, a sort of like magic pill that would give me the same experience, I would have used that in terms of, instead of the sex.
Right.
Yeah, because it was really that freedom of demand.
Yeah.
And for just an hour or so.
Yeah, understood. And it's interesting. I recall as well when 18 months ago when we had first met and, we started first engaging in these subject matters, you had made very clear to me as well that, the behaviors that you were enacting were not unique to you.
Yeah.
They were not distinct to you. And what you were as well really illuminating to me was how many individuals, particularly in the startup world, who are, let's just say, operating more from the dysfunctional frame of building businesses. Because we had as well distinguished between, building businesses in a way that's perhaps more vital, more empowering, more centered towards humanness,
Mm-hmm.
but then as well the more dysfunctional, more old frame of building businesses. And you had reference to me as well how many individuals will have very similar dynamics playing out in their own lives: sex compulsion, porn,
Right.
infidelity, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there, man. Very few people speak about it, right? But it's clearly there. I see it everywhere in the entrepreneurial world.
How did you come to witness it? What were the observations that you were making? Were individuals willing to share that with you, or what did you notice within the startup world?
It's mainly like yeah, like roughly 2 years ago, I kind of like opened up about these topics to the public and received quite some feedback. And within that feedback, I could see that yeah, there were quite some entrepreneurs where like no one from the outside would ever think that, because they're like, from the outside, like they portray that image of like, yeah, the successful guy that has everything under control and like, is like acting 100% out of integrity, but it's simply not true. And they were reaching out because they kind of like felt seen by me sharing my story. So with that, I was like, oh shit, there are actually way more people than I had thought. And yeah, it also raised my awareness for, let's say, the use of substances, especially cocaine.
Mm.
And I was surprised, like, for how many people that are also successful businessmen, the use of substances is quite normal.
Mm.
And with that, there also comes the sex.
Yeah.
Right. It's in the end a very similar kind of mechanism
Yeah.
that's being used there. So, yeah, and then with, let's say, these insights, and then like, now I don't have, let's say, data on paper that proves that, but I got to know my own, let's say, behaviors and like patterns and stuff, right? And I see that in other people, and very likely, they'll have similar ways of releasing their stress and their pressure.
Yeah. Got it. And it's interesting, right? Because within this conversation here, I guess we're framing it as like this sexual dysfunction that can occur among founders. And I also really want to clarify, like, this is not a conversation just for founders.
Yeah.
I guess one reason why we might be speaking about that is because of your background in it, as well, what you've experienced. Most of, as well, of my private clients are founders and entrepreneurs, and I as well see these patterns all the time. I experience them myself, and I think what it really comes down to is that a lot of these dysfunctions, I at least observe, come when we have lived a life framed around achievement, around perfectionism, around emotional suppression or emotional control. Moments where we needed to perhaps be obedient, but then we became all of a sudden defiant. Like, I think these are all mechanisms that eventually lead to us sooner or later coming into that type of circuitry.
Yeah, I agree. It's and just before we come to that, just as a side note, like, just look at how many celebrities like that really look like they live the perfect life on the outside, and then suddenly they have that sex scandal coming up.
Yep.
Like, it just happens again and again and again. So many powerful men basically lost what they have built because they, like, Bill Clinton is a good example, for example. Just so many people who are, let's say, wealthy, successful, powerful, and then it turns out they're in their sex life it's quite leaky and like not really coming from a place of integrity.
Yeah, man.
So I think it is a theme. It's clearly there.
Yeah.
It's clearly there. And I just make one last comment, okay? I have seen the paid sex industry. This industry is way too big to be driven by 10 heavy users. It's just bullshit. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's fucking everywhere.
Yeah, wow.
The sheer amount of, let's say, visits that porn sites receive, the size of the industry of sex workers, this is not a 1% heavy user driven market. Sure, it's probably, I don't know, a big percentage.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, if you just look at some of the statistics as well around porn use, I mean, I don't know what it is around prostitutes and sex escorts, but they're massive, man, and they're significant, and I think it's an important conversation for us to have. And interesting. I actually want to backtrack a little bit And before we stepped into this conversation, I had a bit of an exploration with myself around why this is the case and how this as well occurred for me. And as well, what did I need to move through in order to actually step into sexual integrity? So that's for me the journey around like sexual leakiness, let's just say, or sexual dishonesty, sexual dysfunction towards sexual integrity, and also recognizing the innocence that sex is and the beauty and the magic that sex can be when we do it consensually, when we do it from an empowered place. And what I pondered on is that I think a lot of individuals develop, especially in the West, develop a sense of an internalized sense of shame towards their sense of self. So if we look at like these primary needs that we require as children, love, approval, attention, safety, I perceive that a lot of those are not given for individuals. They were conditionally placed around achievement, around obedience, around, again, emotional control, like showing up in certain ways, right? And so with that, it creates a split. It creates a split in our psyche that communicates to us, these things are good, these things are bad. These are the things that you present to the world. These are the things that you hide from the world, right?
Yeah.
And it's from that internalized sense of shame that we then develop sexual shame, right? Whether it was explicit or implicitly communicated that sex is bad, all of a sudden, you know, especially as teenage boys, we got all this testosterone flooding in our system, and we start to feel confused about it because it becomes coupled with guilt, fear, and shame. And every time we start then feeling arousal, those feelings of guilt, fear, and shame come alive. And then we're trying to actually find relief of the guilt, fear, and shame that we experience as a result of that, often using those very mechanisms from which we actually felt all that shame and guilt in the first place, right? So porn is a perfect example. Yeah. I feel the desire to watch porn. All of a sudden, perhaps I feel shame and guilt around it. I'm trying to find relief from that guilt and shame. I go to porn. I might feel some relief and empowerment as I do it. Coming out of it, I'm like feeling disgusted about myself. And then again, it just creates this really insidious cycle around shame. And I think this is one of the big cycles that a lot of men find themselves in. And that kept me stuck in a 15-year addiction around porn where I just couldn't leave it, right? And I guess one other thing as well that I might just want to add is it creates massive confusion in so many men around the fact that, like, a lot of them get taught this framing around, oh, these are all the ways that I present myself. This is what a good man, quote unquote, is. But then all the more primal, the more instinctual aspects of themselves. Think of like a wild man sort of archetype. It's like we just disconnect from that. Yeah. We totally shut ourselves down from that. And then all those primal instinctual desires that we might have around how we want to engage sexually, maybe it is in power play dynamics, right? Maybe it is in engaging in the sexual act in a ways that is a little bit more taboo. We don't actually feel like we can do that, particularly with the individuals that we love. And so we don't feel like we can get those needs met within our relational container. So we believe we need to do that perhaps elsewhere, or it leaks out in porn. We infuse all of that fantasy we have about the ways that we want to engage sexually into that, or we do it with those individuals with whom we don't have that heart connection. So I see that disconnect between heart and as well genitals. So I feel like I say a lot here. But yeah, feel free to jump in on anything that.
I find that that's very complete kind of like description.
Mm,
I would add one thing. You say, I can relate to what you're saying. And there's another aspect that has been true for me, and that is even bigger for me than the shame piece. The shame piece clearly being there, but there's also another piece, which is, and you spoke to like the fragmentation of like our parts, right? And the very fragmentation of us already creates stress and a desire for feeling whole and complete, which is any moment where that fragmentation basically is not present.
As Bjoern and I recorded this founder series, one thing became clear. Founders and high-performing men are hungry for a place where they can speak honestly, develop emotional leadership, and be supported by people who understand the pressures they live with. With that in mind, we're opening a small and intimate cohort beginning February 2026 for founders, business professionals, and leaders who want to apply the principles we explore in the series to their lives so they can lead with clarity, emotional steadiness, and integrity, even in high-pressure situations. Now, this is not a large program. It is a focused space where members receive personal mentorship from both of us. Bjoern brings more than 15 years of entrepreneurial experience, investing and advising founders, grounded in years of Zen meditation. My background in embodied coaching, somatic work, and teaching over the past decade helps men reconnect to themselves, regulate under pressure, and lead from a grounded and aligned place. When we tested this approach with a group of founders in Berlin, the response was clear. Men felt supported not just in their business challenges, but in their relationships, emotional life, and inner world. Each month, we will meet for a 3-hour session combining coaching, mentorship, and guided embodiment work. The aim is simple: to help you stay grounded, connected, and clear in the areas that matter most. This cohort is designed for founders and leaders who want to move beyond high-functioning stress, lead their business, relationships, and live in an embodied and integrated way, build a life that feels aligned rather than reactive. You'll be supported by people who understand what you carry and who can help you lead from your core instead of from pressure. If this is the kind of guidance and structure you desire, you'll find a link to join in the show notes.
And there are a few states in which that doesn't matter. And one of these states is like sexual, like high sexual arousal. That's where like all these things disappear and just present in the moment, in the experience, maybe lost in the experience, doesn't matter.
Love
But
that.
I'm stepping out of the fragmented stuff that is supposed to be this, but not supposed to be that.
Yeah.
The thing is with that idea of like being supposed to see only certain aspects of ourselves is that we are all these parts.
Yeah.
And the way that like at least I grew up is like, it's a fragmented way, which doesn't work. Because I'm all these things. And if I don't learn how to be all this and be not to be all them, but to be with all of these things that I am, I carry stress constantly. Right? And that's already like generating a craving for a release. And a very easy release is then porn, right? And I love what you said about, like, say, the sex heart connection, because it's definitely something that I experienced. Like, stuff where I thought, oh, okay, that's a fantasy, and maybe it's not even coming from a place of love. Like the moment I'm in a relationship where I can actually bring these things and I can have, let's say, sex in a way that before appeared to me, oh, that can't come from a place of love. I can actually have that type of sex from a place of love. It's actually available.
Yeah.
You know, they have that funny saying of David Data, which is like, spank her by feeling her heart. And it's true, man. I've experienced it. It's true. So I love that. But that's a whole different topic, right? Because that's like, there's a whole like teaching behind it and a practice and stuff.
Right. And I definitely want to bookmark that because I think it's an important aspect. Like, I think it's important for a man to own the type of sex that he needs in order to really feel fulfilled. So let's bookmark that as well for later.
But I would be curious to hear if you're open to like, how did you deal with your porn addiction and what helped you to get out of it eventually?
Oh, man. Yeah. First of all, thank you. And definitely wanted to bring in this conversation around porn. Perhaps before I go into that, I want to, first of all, communicate the hole that porn filled for me, and as well what I observe with a lot of individuals. And then share a little bit around my journey around that, and of course, exchange back and forth around anything that we're seeing. But yeah, man, porn is a really, really insidious one as well because it's so addictive and it's so liberating in the moment when you do it. And I recall when I first came into it, I remember it was very innocent. Like, I was in Canada at the time, and I was intending to have a sleepover with a group of friends whose parents ended up going out of town for the weekend. And I just grabbed some of my stuff and ended up going back to their place. And I saw all the guys hunched over the computer And what I started to discover is that they were watching porn, right? And up until that time, I mean, the closest thing that I had was like porn mags, right? But it wasn't like really the visual stimulation of an actual video on of individuals engaging in that. And I noticed it was super scary to my nervous system, but also it was very thrilling and exciting to my nervous system at the same time, which actually, if you just look at it, it communicates as well the nervous system state that I had been conditioned into, which has been a lot around chaos and panic. So interesting enough, that state of watching porn actually perpetuated that. And there was something very familiar about that, right? Um, and, it took a few years for me to actually really start going into that because I had so much like shame around it. But then as soon as I started really going into engaging with it actively as well with myself and not feeling like all the inhibitions around it that I had, it was really tough, man. It was really, really tough. And essentially the moments I used it was when I was completely alone or I felt completely alone. And I lacked the experience of nurturance, of love, of acceptance, of safety. There was so much stress that was going on in my system, and I would experience bullying at school
Mm.
and complete disapproval and a disconnection from others. I felt like I didn't belong at all. And then I would come home and I would come back into this like tumultuous environment where there was just a lot of tension and friction with my parents, particularly at the time, them being immigrants to this like foreign country. They couldn't even speak the language. It was just a really tough time, for all of us, I think, right? And like even within that, I just felt so much unsafety. And so I recognized I was looking for so much relief from all that I was experiencing. I had no one to go to, right? So this is where I would say porn addiction gets formed, right? It's when we're looking for emotional regulation. It's when we're looking for some form of relief, and often it is in secrecy, right? And so this is how it got formed for me, and this is also what I see with so many men. Porn is not used because they're horny
Mm.
or because they're turned on. It's usually because there's some form of uncomfortable emotion that they had learned to couple with sexual activation or sexual arousal to essentially avoid or escape the very emotion that they don't want to feel, right? And that was exactly what I was experiencing. And what was really humbling for me was 5 years ago when I decided, hey, like this doesn't feel good anymore. I actually don't want to do this. And the reason why, like it just, what became so much more evident was the pain that I experienced on the other side of engaging with pornography. And I realized I don't want this anymore in my life. And that really led me down the really hard journey of stepping out of porn. And I would argue there's so many different aspects to that. Um, yeah, I'm kind of asking myself if I should like reference all the things that, I think are really integral and important to coming out of porn right now. Perhaps I'll just share a few of those. First of all, I think it's really about inquiring into the emotion that we're avoiding and learning how to emotionally regulate ourselves in a way that is different from that response that we have chosen, and using actually the body in a way actively that allows us to step out of that response that we're experiencing. So I think embodiment is a really important aspect of it. Um, Coming into sexual integrity is a really big piece of it. So I think for me as well, there was a time where I just became very sensitive towards all my sexual leakiness,
Mhm.
the way I was, and it wasn't just porn, right? It was also sexual compulsion. It was ways that I was, wanting to sleep with women to feel worthy about myself. It was just all a fucking messy soup. So I had to like really step into sexual integrity again. There was a time where I was celibate. There was a time where I was not engaging with women. Like you can kind of call it like a feminine cleanse almost that I was going through. I had to, first of all, let go of the shame around pornography because I think that's a really massive issue. The more shame you feel about the engagement of porn, the more you're probably going to try to find relief again. It's
Mhm.
what I addressed and referenced earlier. I think something that really helped me, and this is something that David Data as well references, is understand the underlying desire behind some of the porn that you watch.
Mhm.
So generally, there's going to be certain themes around the type of porn that individuals really enjoy, right?
Yeah.
And for anyone listening in, I really encourage you to have a look at that and or ponder on that. What is the type of porn that you fantasize about? What is it that turns you on? And then consider for yourself as well the underlying quality or texture that you're looking for. Perhaps it's power. That was a big one for me. Another one for me is like abundance or like feminine nourishment. You know? So there's all kinds of ways that we're trying to get certain needs met and are actually nourishing to our system. And I think clarifying or normalizing that can take some of the shame away, but can also allow us to be more intentional, more deliberate in getting those needs met. I as well had to learn to be comfortable having sexual arousal in my system,
Mhm.
feeling the charge of my sexual desire and not needing to do anything about it, learning to breathe it and learning to as well cycle that energy up. And thankfully, as well, at the time, I was exploring a lot around Qigong and Tantra, sacred intimacy. So all of that was really supportive for me at the time. Re-engaging again in self-pleasure in a way that is not dysfunctional, that doesn't add more shame to the topic, but actually allows me to feel the innocence and the beauty of the sexual act, you know? I think there can be something incredibly wonderful when a man engages in sexual pleasure with himself, and something very liberating as well, when you can come to really appreciate, enjoy the engagement of sexual pleasure with yourself in the absence of um, fantasy or porn, and you can learn to enjoy that. There's something incredibly powerful. There's something incredibly empowering about it. Why is that? Because you don't need a woman anymore to
Mhm.
get your sexual needs met.
Mhm.
You can meet them by yourself.
Mhm.
And that's something so fucking empowering for me and something that I get so hyped about because I think a lot of men make disempower themselves so much because they project all their sexuality onto women. And I'm like, dude, your sexuality is for you, man. Like, you might engage it with another woman, but it's for you.
Yeah.
And I think this is also another really important piece that I think needs to be added here. Last thing I'll say, and this is a little bit tender for me because I haven't shared about this on air yet, but so I would say on my journey over the last 5 years, I've always kind of stumbled back into it. And there was a time where I was quite okay-ish with my behavior on porn, where it's like it would show up once a month, but I knew it wasn't fully in integrity with me, and I wasn't proud of it. And it actually elicited a lot of the shame. Um, and something that changed massively for me was when a year ago, I received some support through MDMA assisted therapy. So as I share about this right now, I really want to as well, like, say on air, I'm not here encouraging, prescribing individuals to take psychedelic assisted therapy, but it supported me. It helped me on my journey, right? And what it did for me was it allowed me to uncouple a lot of the internalized shame that I had that I'd referenced earlier that I think is the root for so many men.
Mhm.
And it was that. It was one session for me. And I knew I was never gonna go back to porn again. And, since then I've been like almost a year clean now. And that
Nice.
feels incredibly liberating to my
Yeah.
system. And I would also argue that I think the session had such an impact on me because of all the work that I did prior to that.
Mm.
So I know I went on a bit of a tangent with all of that, but I hope it was useful.
Nice. Thanks for sharing them.
You're welcome,
Learned
man.
that. Mhm. Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, I wonder what is coming up for you around that, and as well, if you were to, you know, if we were to just throw the topic of porn back to you and hear a little bit around your journey around it and where you stand with it today. I think that would be really interesting for us to hear.
Happy to share that. So yeah, so I mentioned before, like, say, probably 15-ish years of like, unhealthy relationship to porn at like peak times, as I said before, like using it a couple of days to just simply like release stress.
Yeah.
Then also got a bit into, well, I saw like the downside of it, and was actually breathwork that helped me to basically move away from it. Couple of sessions, and then like I stopped from one day to another.
Yeah.
Then dived also a bit deeper into tantra and like, changed my self-pleasure routine, these type of things. Got a bit into retention and, semen retention, these type of things. So that was all helpful. I probably stayed away from it for like a good amount of like roughly 2 years or so, maybe something like that, 1.5, 2 years. And then started watching it from time to time again. Important for me to say that I do not approve of the free public platforms and the way that they produce their content. I believe it's some big shadows there. So I'm using an ethical kind of like production platform where also like the founder is very public and like sharing how they do the content, and it's like very different to the public websites.
If I may jump in, what do you see as the difference from those like two platforms such as Pornhub, UJS, whatever you want to like say?
What's the main differences?
Yeah, what are the main differences between, I guess?
Yeah. So yes, it's on multiple levels. So one is the type of content itself. It's in a certain way, it's way more real in a way that like how people look like, how like the type of sex is way less disconnected. You will still find a couple of videos that look kind of like disconnected, but it's with way less disconnected content.
Got it.
There are almost no, let's say, very violent whatever type of videos. There's transparency around how the content is produced. So like with, let's say, 99%, you can ensure that no one has been forced to do something they don't want. There's no drugs being used, these type of things. The platform is not only about porn itself, it's also tutorials like how to, engage in like certain ways sexually with your partner, how to have the right conversations, how to use this, how to that. It's like more like a community, even in a certain way.
Yeah.
And you will still find a couple of, let's say, high class produced, very polished kind of videos. But you also have like a big variety of like things that is just way more real. And with that, it takes away of like, there's also something that porn does, right? It gives us a completely wrong view on like how a body will look like and how sex actually works. So it's much closer to how sex actually looks like. Just to give you a very concrete example, right? There would be couples that like upload like, let's say, an hour-long video where they basically document their day and where they have sex.
Yeah.
As I also take you with you to the restaurant, to like the beach, to like that, and you get like it's way more connected in a certain way. You see them having conversation, you see them having dinner, you see them meeting friends and blah blah, and then they also have sex. But like it's not like this one snapshot of like complete fake sex that you get on a regular platform, right? These are like just a few things. And again, like the main thing for me is like, the founder is like, it's very public, so and they're very open about like the way they produce their content. So I can make sure when I watch that content, there's no one being harmed. There's no one, let's say, given substances and then doing something they don't want.
Yeah.
There's no like, say, abuse, and they really do the best they can to ensure that it's ethical what they do, right? So anyways, I'm using that platform from time to time. Not very often. And only if I'm not with my partner, basically. And I can, by now, I can see how in the past it was about stress, it was about not wanting to feel something, these type of things. I can by now say it's, and I don't even don't use it all the times when I have pressure. So many times I don't use it. But I can say today I do it from a place of, let's say, finding some inspiration, loving to just consume that content.
Yeah.
I want to own that the impulse to suppress an emotion with porn still lives inside of me. but it has the capacity to not follow that.
Yeah.
And I would say 99% of when that happens, I am able to see that impulse and then not follow it. And then maybe 1 out of 10, it just still happens. Just want to also normalize that. And
if I may just jump in here, because I think this could be an interesting conversation for us to explore for a few minutes. And we actually had a conversation about this as well on the ride to a workshop that we had led together as well. And we kind of discussed as well the pros and cons of like ethical porn and like what your views are on that. And for me, it was very clear that I'm not in a position where I feel like I'm gonna return to it. And I just perceive in myself that, because of my wiring, because of as well the compulsive aspect to the way that I engaged in porn, and as well to the sensitivity of how it fucked up my dopamine receptors, and just as well the internalized shame that it created for me. I'm just making a deliberate choice that I don't want that in my life.
Yeah.
But like when I hear you speaking about it, there's nothing in me like that's coming up around this idea of like this is wrong or this should be different. And I think for me, I mean, like we could like package this as well around this conversation around like morals around porn. Should people watch porn or not? To be honest with you, I don't feel enough educated to really speak about that as a subject matter. For me, what's more interesting is actually, how can men that don't want to watch porn actually stop watching porn? That's the first one. But also, how can we actually still appreciate the eros, the erotic desires that we have, right? And I think this is what you're communicating, right? That we are at the end of the day as well erotic beings.
Yeah, totally.
And we're inspired by sex, and there's something incredibly creative about it, right? And I've had as well over the years moments where, of course, like sexual imagery or perhaps even videos were exchanged with partners, with of mine or with mine, right? And I recognized it absolutely did not have an impact like the way porn has. I mean, porn is fucking designed, like for, in some ways, the male brain, and in some ways as well to really get you addicted and to give you the like the high of your life, and essentially to really get you hooked in that and stay on the platforms, right? That's what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
yeah, I guess, is there anything that you like want to add in terms of the things that I just kind of spoken about and shared?
To be honest, for me, the topic feels quite complete at that point.
Yeah.
Look, I think in the end, I would say one can have a healthy relationship to almost any type of substance. Question is always, why am I doing it?
Yeah,
Am I harming myself or others?
exactly.
Does it feel of integrity to follow a certain impulse to like either watch porn or like take a substance and do whatever? And do I need it? Like if you tell me tomorrow, like you can never ever watch porn in your life again, say, yeah, whatever, that's fine. I just move on. And it wouldn't bother me at all.
Yeah, and that's a sign of a healthy like response to that.
Exactly. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think there's no point in discussing whether porn is right or wrong or whatever. It comes down to like, how was my relationship to it?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the big thing as well is like, for anyone listening in, like, are you doing it in secrecy? Is it something that you're hiding from the world?
Oh yeah, I love that point. That's a big change I want to like speak to for a second. Like,
Please.
I was doing it in secrecy like for 15 years, and and now I'm as you see it, like, and I'm sharing about that publicly. I'm completely owning that. I'm also owning that towards my partner. She knows that, and that feels quite liberating. And with that, actually, the relationship is healthy.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, just realizing for myself that this is actually a big change. I wasn't really aware of it, that yeah, it's so different that like now it's like, yeah, I was clear about it from the beginning on in my relationship, and that's fine, and that's seen, and that's, accepted, and it feels pretty good to me.
It decouples you from all the shame that
Yeah,
that could
exactly.
be present around.
Yeah.
This is what it's really about at the end of the day. There's so much shame. And I think a lot of men don't even realize that.
Yeah.
They're oblivious to the fact that they might feel shame around their sexuality
Yeah.
and their sexual expression of it, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is really why it needs to be communicated. This is why it needs to be expressed. And also we got to be curious about it, you know? Like, from which place are we engaging? Some guys think they need to engage sexually in a way that is communicating prowess, that is communicating strength. Well, that can be a beautiful way to engage with your sexuality and can, exercise that like power that we carry as men. I think if it's the only way that you're going to have sex, you're going to feel shame around showing up in your softness, perhaps having moments in engaging sexually where you're going to feel vulnerable, right? So it actually, a lot of men believe they need to like receive the validation, the approval. They need to be chosen by this woman or to be worthy, right? Which again communicates all this sense of like, I'm worthless.
Yeah.
I'm not worthy.
I think the reality is that bringing topic a bit back to entrepreneurs, when I approach my company from that place, a place of like, I'm unworthy and now I need to build that empire and then I will finally be worthy and whole, very likely this pattern is going to show up in my sex life as well. And it can even be that in the absence of business success, sexual success, quote unquote, with women is a substitute for that. I would argue that this is true for some individuals.
Tell me more about that.
So let's say whatever I'm doing on my entrepreneurial journey is not really working out, and I don't get the approval from my investors, from my peers, from the public. I need to find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that somewhere else is winning over women to sleep with me.
That was my shadow in my 20s. Because like I had, it's like all my fucking dad stuff and all that. But like my young 20s to mid 20s, I had shunned money and I had shunned like, everything around society because I saw how it disconnected me from my father. And so I just wanted to be entirely different. But at the same time, I still felt very worthless about myself. And so this is why I was like constantly chasing women and wanting to acquire women and just to gain some form of validation of my worth.
Yeah, no, I think there's a pattern that's alive for many men, I would say.
So I would like to again illuminate the conversation a little bit more on founders and not just founders, but like I guess men who are in high stress environments, men who are very much driven by their performance, perhaps men that need to emotionally suppress a lot. Tell me a little bit more about what you're seeing around why, particularly for that subgroup, these challenges might occur.
So first of all, I would say that even though things are changing in society, it's still true that, let's say, the showing just one side of myself, not really being regulated, portraying a certain image will get me to a certain level of success. Success being defined as having access to power and money.
Yeah.
It's true. It works. It's not very healthy, but it works. It's rewarded by society.
Yeah.
It still works even today. And we still like put people on a pedestal that clearly have all of these traits. Just look at our world leaders. The world is full of these people.
Yeah, we give them a lot of admiration.
Totally.
Yeah.
So first I want to say, it's if I'm, let's say, beginning of my career and I say, okay, I'm here today, I want to get there. What traits will me get there? Yeah, I will look at the successful individuals, find their traits, and just go on the same path. And demonstrating these traits will be rewarded by society. So I also want to say this is, at least for the first couple of years, it's probably even the easier way.
If I may just jump in here, do you think like you would have been able to build your company in the way that you did without going into that direction as well? Do you think it could have been done in a healthy way without all these coping mechanisms?
No, not in that speed. Not in that speed.
So I think this is also like demonstrating some of the challenges and the issues that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Like so many individuals are so primed towards, let's get there really fast. And then what do I need to do that? Well,
Yeah.
all these fucking coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's always hard to, let's say, go back and then change one thing and then, assume that the rest stays the same, right? But no, I simply don't think so. So coming back to your question, so one is definitely like, it's rewarded. It's still very normal. Yeah, just look at all the people we look up, like Elon Musk, for example, demonstrating certain character traits that are the opposite of, let's say, love and compassion and some mercy. People you look up to don't demonstrate like character traits that are different. What else is there? Then, I mean, entrepreneurship is they're just, one of the environments with the highest level of stress. So the stress needs to go somewhere, and many people don't have a good understanding of what their system. I mean, there are some that do, but many people don't have a good understanding of what their system actually needs to release stress. Then there's also, and I think that's also changing with, let's say, newer generations. But let's say, especially for my generation, it's still true. They had no fucking education about like what is an emotion and how to deal with it.
Yeah.
Just had no education.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple actually, but like we learned all sorts of bullshit in school. Like I can still do like the fucking math from like the past few years, and I don't need it at all anymore. But no one told me like what's an emotion, where does it come from, what does it want from me, why is it here? Is that me? Is it not me? What the fuck? What's my relationship to it? Zero education about something that has such a power over us, right? It's insane. It's completely insane.
And I almost wonder as well if we would even need that education if we were raised in a way that didn't require us to be disconnected from our emotions. Because I would propose as well, like, if we were raised in environments where our emotionality is fully welcomed and encouraged, like the natural capacity of being with it like children are already teaches us about emotions.
Totally. And I wanna say there's clearly a part of me that's completely blaming the school system.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's also responsibility there to like
Agree.
because
Yep.
as children we spend, let's say from age 6, 7,
Yeah.
we spend half a day roughly with in school. Let's say 1/3 of the day we are in school, and then 2/3 of the day we are with our family.
Sure.
Give or take a few hours, right? So there's a responsibility for the school system to educate us how to be human and what that means. And then yes, ideally all families like, but looking at my parents, for example, they were still born during World War II. I don't blame them for not knowing how to deal with emotions. It was probably very healthy to shut themselves off from certain emotions. But
In Germany, right?
During a fucking war.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. But then, school system could come in and help.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist, right? So that's just a few things that come to mind why, why we see these like this disconnection, and when then that is the way we grow up, then that meets a high level of stress, and very high expectations on self, and lots of pressure from all sorts of groups. There we go. And then just choose your person. Some choose sex, some choose drugs, whatever.
I think also another thing that plays into that, I believe, is just I'm just going to say it directly, toxic messaging that men receive around what makes a man.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah.
So like that is also believe something that is unique to men, in the sense of like we receive this messaging, this incredible confusion around the fact of, oh, we want you to be really vulnerable, and then like your masculine traits are toxic, right? Or no, we don't want you to be too soft. Oh, but we need you to be strong as well. And it just creates this like fucking whirlwind around, who the fuck do you need me to be?
Mm-hmm. That's true. However, I want to share here that so I felt super masculine last night, and I did the opposite, the fucking opposite of, let's say, someone like Andrew Tate would consider quite masculine. So I was basically collapsing in tears in a session where my partner was like facilitating me with a breathwork session. I was completely collapsing in that session in front of her, and like seeing that we stay in connection while I'm at my weakest, and having the strength to demonstrate that made me feel very strong and very confident in myself, very strong, very masculine. Like I can bring all of my parts, and I have the courage to do that. And I felt so full of courage that I did that. No other thing that is considered masculine that I ever had in my life made me feel that way. I felt very tender as well, but I felt extremely in my power for having the courage to go to that place and just be that open to, in front of my partner.
Yeah.
And that's just a completely misconception around what it is that defines, masculine.
What do you believe was a defining factor, though, that made you feel so masculine in that moment?
I would say my access to my courage to just be 100% that what I am in this moment.
Yeah.
Just 100%. If that what I am in that moment is basically collapsing in tears, then this is what I am in that moment. Doesn't mean that I'm still that in 10 seconds later, but in that moment, that's the truth.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's just, the truth is what it is.
Yeah.
The truth of the moment.
Yeah.
And it's always just a moment that is passing, or it's the next moment coming, but it's the truth of the moment. There's nothing more powerful than the truth of the moment. And having the courage to be that rather than being something else or suppressing that or whatsoever, it elicited in me at least a product or feeling of like, I'm courageous, bold, strong individual that can basically handle everything.
What comes up for me as well is that, that space of unconditional acceptance that your partner probably had for you definitely must have supported you in that. And what I consider as well is that, and this is a bit of a shadow that I'm seeing in relationships, that I observe some partners offering that space to their men. But then when they do, they all of a sudden feel incredible fear around, oh, is my man always going to stay in that vulnerable and tender place? Which again leads to the man not feeling safe around being that gentle and tender. And it creates this whole confusion. And I think also what I might want to add here, my guess is why it also felt masculine is because you're also like a fucking warrior that can build a, like 9-figure business. Like, that as well about yourself.
Totally.
And so I think it also requires a bit of that, knowing that we can also go back into the other extreme if we had to.
Yeah, totally. It's
see that?
about range.
Yes.
It's about range, having access to all of these things. But when we, at least like, yeah, it says the average kind of like idea of what is masculine is not about range. It's like a certain
Yes.
3 to 5
Super narrow.
character traits, super narrow, and that's simply not true, right?
I love that as a framing, and I think especially if we look at it more from the lens of entrepreneurs and founders and guys who are super performative, I mean, they'll have a certain particular vision of what it means to be a man.
Yeah.
And actually what you'll observe is that there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear around stepping into emotionality in the way that you did last night. So actually stepping into that is a fucking bold move,
Yeah.
And I would like, of course I've experienced it many times myself as well, right? And my capacity as well to come out of it gives me a level of trust and a level of appreciation of being in those moments when I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this is also a huge thing that perhaps we should explore here a little bit around the fact that the very thing that might support you in building your business, whether it's dysfunctional or not, is the very thing that's actually destroying your relationship. Because the propping and all this demonstrating of strength and all that is not supportive for actually creating intimacy.
Oh, yeah.
Because intimacy is being with what's real. It's being with what's here.
Yeah. Agree.
And so if there's insecurity here, if there's fear here, if there's shame here, if there's self-doubt here, it's already present.
Yeah.
And so we got to bring it in some way or another.
Yeah.
Right. And we can have a conversation about how we bring it in relationship. But that's what's needed for intimacy.
Yeah. Totally. Totally.
And also just want to like reflect back to you. I think this is something you're incredibly good at. Like, you're incredibly good at being yourself as you are. Like whether it's in connection to me as a very close friend, but also in your romantic relationship. And it seems like there's an honoring of whatever is there. And I would imagine as well, this is as well what allows you to feel the level of peace that you're feeling, whether it's relationally or sexually. Would you agree with that? Or what are your...
100%. I would always say it needs someone who's like willing to go to that place as well.
Of course,
right? Because if the other person doesn't want that, then things become quite difficult.
Yeah.
I see you're smiling. But like if that's available between two human beings that are in a relationship, that opens a massive level of intimacy. And actually, I really like what you said, right? And probably you were saying I'm good at that because I had so much pain from feeling one thing and having to portray something else.
Yeah.
And if I like the thought of going back to that place, that drains all energy from my system. It is the worst nightmare for me.
I can relate to that.
It's just so bad. I don't want that anymore. And then there are like tools and techniques like when to honor truth, like be attuned to the nervous system of your partner, right? Just when she's at her lowest, maybe don't bring her all your shit for the next 12 hours, right? Like there are some tools and practices how to then do that and how to live that way, right? And that's important to like look at them. And it's important to be clear like who's right now holding space and who's like sharing and like these type of things, right? And it's probably like people can find that on your podcast elsewhere. But let's forget about the tools and practices, how we then live that. Yeah, to me, the most empowering, most masculine feeling I can access is by owning the truth of the moment and bringing that in a contained way.
That's a really important caveat that you're naming here. In a contained way.
Yeah.
Right? And I think this is also what I believe sometimes gets missed and something that maybe some men might not be fully aware of. And also it requires a shitload of work to bring your experience in a contained way. Like if you have been on a journey of emotional suppression and repression for decades, and now you're trying to bring your stuff in relationship in a contained way, I'm like, good luck. And I really say it with a lot of compassion. I don't want to say it with judgment or shame. I want to be clear about that. But I guess I want to clarify, it takes fucking years, man.
Yeah.
Like it took me years to come into a place of, first of all, stepping out of emotional repression and suppression, starting to feel my emotions, then becoming like a watery mess. Right? And then starting to like return back to my solidity again.
Yeah.
You see that a lot in Bali, right? A lot of guys come out of their exits and all that, and then they become super watery in Bali and super flowy and can't even trust them anymore. And then eventually it comes a transition moment, sooner or later for some guys.
Yeah, I think the key thing to kind of like learn over time is the ability to speak to what is there and also like express it, but like in a grounded and centered way.
Yes.
Like this just happened, I feel hurt, and not like yelling at her, you did that, what the fuck, you hurt me. Completely different way of presenting a fact.
Totally.
Right? Actually, we just went through that on Sunday for whatever reason. Like I was completely emotionally unstable on Sunday, and it's just things kind of was like, what the fuck? Why am I feeling that? And then I brought it to her, but I was like, I'm here. That's what's happening inside of me. What's happening inside of you? Let's look at that together in a contained way. I was expressing what I felt, and I allowed myself to feel it, but I wasn't acting out the emotion on her.
Yes.
And that makes a big difference.
So important. I love what you're saying, because I think it's very important as well if you look at the physics of relationships, and like as well, certain, polarities that we might want to uphold. If you're going to be an emotional, watery mess in relationship to your woman, she starts to feel like she needs to step into more the space holder.
Yeah.
And like take care of you.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes create a little bit of that mommy son dynamic that can happen. And then, the polarities all of a sudden get reversed, and she doesn't feel safe with you. And like, it just becomes a mess, Whereas if you can come from a place of like, I'm not going to hide this as my experience from you, because that also creates unsafety. If you hide your experience entirely, oh, I'm good. I don't feel anything. Like, come on, she feels it,
Oh man. Yeah, she feels it.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's even crazy to me, like how they pick it up, in ways where I'm like oblivious to my own experience.
Mm-hmm. I need to share something that was extremely edgy for me, but it's like kind of like a demonstration of my commitment to the truth.
I love it.
So we were laying in bed after, let's say, some very passionate days. One day, like 24 hours later, okay? We're laying in bed, and like the day was kind of like lots of work, like workout, both like low energy. You're laying in bed, and I started feeling like, oh, there's a lack of passion here coming out of my system. And my mind was looking at this feeling of lack of passion, like, what the fuck, are you fucking crazy? There's no evidence in here that we have a lack of passion. No evidence, zero, not possible to any way to explain that. And I was just sitting with that feeling. I didn't do anything with it. And she asked me, hey, what's up? I said, nothing. She said, you're feeling a lack of passion. And that's like, okay, shit, like your intuition is so good. I need to own it now. Yes, it's true. I'm right now feeling a lack of passion. And let me just say, there's no rational explanation for that. It's just here right now.
Yeah.
And let me just be with that. And then we kind of talked about it. And by owning the fact that I felt it, it already left my system.
Yeah. Fuck me, man.
But that was super edgy, because like, yeah, it didn't make any sense. And then seeing that she was able to hold that.
Yeah.
And we were both laughing at it as like, what the fuck? Like, what is that?
I love it, man.
But both making fun of my mind, basically, and then it kind of like went away. So anyways, it takes, what I'm trying to say here is like, there are a few elements that need to be in a relationship from my point of view for order to like first of all, there needs to be a commitment to truth.
Yes.
There needs to be a commitment to her intuition.
Yeah.
If it's true. I think one of the worst things, and I'm definitely guilty of that, and I did that to my ex-wife, definitely. She felt something, I didn't want it to be true, and said, no, it's not true. And I do not want to do that to a woman again. So I really committed to honoring the intuition and her ability to feel something that is inside of me, but I don't want, but she simply feels it.
That's beautiful. And let's maybe explore that a little bit deeper, and, maybe as well touch on this idea of repair for a few moments, and then maybe bookmark towards how can we step out of sexual leakiness or dysfunction into sexual integrity. And that's kind of where we can land the plane of this conversation. But let me ask you, do you think, like, if a man has engaged dysfunctionally in his sexuality, do you think there is a way of creating repair with a partner who you might have unconsciously harmed as a result of your actions?
I don't know. I'm not experienced in that. If both are okay, I would say, if both are committed to a process of, like, say, deep personal, very deep work, if both have a willingness to commit to compassion and truth, and ideally there's some element of like a spiritual combined path, I think there's a chance to work through that.
Yeah. I believe that as well. And, I've observed it more from the distance. I don't have like individuals in my close proximity where I've like seen that happen, but, you know, picked up as well some of those stories as well in retreats and workshops and all that of couples. So yeah, I believe that as well.
Yeah. Where it doesn't work is if someone is too afraid to lose the other person and suppresses, like, right? That's not what we are talking about. But the real deep repair process, I think it can work here.
So let's talk a little bit more around this idea of how can we now step away from all this dysfunction and start to actually appreciate what our sexuality is and bring it in a healthy way in our relationship, in a way where we actually feel met? What do you believe is really supportive, and what do you believe is really necessary in that?
Okay, the first thing that comes up for me is a commitment of both to stay in connection and meet each other in a regulated, present, calm way, even though there might be disagreement around the content that is discussed.
Yeah.
The moment, let's say I have a certain sexual desire, and the moment it's not safe to express that, because on the other side, I will lose one of the most important connections in my life, probably as my romantic partner. I might not. I will probably not do that. I will take it elsewhere, right? Because the price is too high. The risk is way too high. I'm not going to take that risk. So before we even speak about sharing whatever, I think there needs to be this commitment to listen to each other with compassion and understanding, and a willingness to whatever that brings up, not take it out on each other, or if that happens, come back and meet again in love and compassion. And that in turn requires work with the nervous system. It requires self-awareness. It requires an understanding of the mind and everything. And once I have a good, let's say, set of tools and practices in place, and I have this commitment, then I can, from my point of view, start bringing in whatever it is that I'm carrying with me in terms of my sexuality into the relationship, and then see what can we do in a consensual way to meet all of these different needs and stuff that is here.
I think that's really beautifully put, man. I think where I would as well go with that, essentially saying it in different words, is I would love a man just to get to know himself sexually.
Yeah.
Like, what do you want? What turns you on? What fantasies do you have? What do you desire, right? And I think there's something about it that I would love to normalize for some men. And, some of those desires might be super taboo for them. And I'm not even saying like those taboo desires need to be enacted in the relationship. It's actually what I've observed with some of my taboo desires. Once I normalize them, that charge that was like connected to the desire actually went away, and then I didn't even feel a lot of that turn on. But like there's some ways that I do want to engage in my like sexuality. So as an example, like I considered I'd done this erotic blueprint. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
But I did it like 2 years ago, I believe, for the first time. And I came to recognize I actually have a lot more kink in my blueprint than I thought, right? And I just pondered on that a little bit. And I realized, yes, I actually do like to play with power dynamics in a very consensual way. And there is something in my psyche that loves to explore dominance in a way that's healthy, in a way that's consensual, in a way that's also exciting for my partner. It's something that nourishes me on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on a level of me being a man. That's important to me in some ways, right? And I think I just would love for men to actually have these conversations within themselves or even with other men.
Yeah. I want to bring in something that you said earlier, but I think it fits really well here. I think it is important to distinguish between a fantasy and the energy texture that is underneath that fantasy that we want to feel and express. And it can be really helpful, first for myself, to understand what is this, like this fantasy, this like certain way how things have to be and have to be played out, right? What is the energy that I want to feel? And maybe that gives me already some clarity. And then bringing it to my partner, because she might even have, or he, doesn't matter what type of relationship I'm, right? My partner might have an idea how we could explore that energy
Love that.
that would work for my partner, and the play out would look different. But if I don't know what it is that I want to feel, I will be stuck with a fantasy that my mind has created that is probably even disconnected from my emotions around that.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's an extremely important exploration.
So could it be fair to say that the fantasy is almost used as a means
Yeah.
to actually meet a certain texture or flavor that we want to have met sexually?
Totally. And I can just speak from my own experience. The moment I understood that, it helped me to access these type of energies. And what it did for me is, I can now feel, for example, in my case, like I really love dominant energy sometimes. I can access it when I'm in it and acting it out, even in, let's say, very kind of like normal quote unquote sex.
Mm.
I feel very satisfied in my desire to feel dominant energy. And I don't even need to go to places that are, let's say, acted out in a certain way. I might still want to do that at some point, but I realized for myself, oh wow, actually I can feel that if I really allow myself to feel it in a certain moment, even if I have, let's say, normal sex.
Yeah.
And just bringing that and really feeling it and bringing that through little details through my body,
Yeah.
that feels very satisfying already.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I don't want to explore certain things at some point, right? But it's important to not get stuck with a fantasy. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. I love what you're saying. And I think it also speaks volumes to the fact that there's so many different facets to, I believe, being a man.
Yeah.
And different textures that are craving to be met. I think there is a wild man and there is a dominant aspect that lives in all of us. But I think a lot of men have not embraced the fact that this lives in them.
Yeah.
Right. And I think if we can just find access points in some ways to nourish those aspects, it's like we'll then discover, like, almost as if, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like I've been starving all my life and now I finally had food.
Mm. Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
And, again, to your point as well, like, it doesn't have to be in the engagement of penetration, right? It can also just be through at the day to day, how you can play out a little bit with these textures here and there, right?
Yeah, totally. And this is just a maybe very practical recommendation for me, some people listening. For example, I discovered when I was like off porn for like 2 years or so, I realized that there was a desire to watch, let's say, very dominant porn, even to an extent where, like, let's say that I don't really agree to, right, and the way it's presented. And I was sitting, I was like, what the fuck? Why is that here? And I said, okay, let me try one thing. I took some martial arts classes, and guess what? It's gone. It's gone. I just needed a place where I can bring my warrior, my dominance, my like fighter energy, and it just needs to move.
So beautiful.
And the moment it's moved,
Yeah.
like since I'm training regularly, and obviously many other things have changed inside of myself, right? But I still remember that day when I was like really disappointed in myself, like, why the fuck am I having that desire? I thought I'm over it. Went to the class and it's gone.
It just highlights for me again that, like, the desire itself was innocent.
Yeah.
It just, there was actually something real and there's something really true in that desire.
Yeah.
You actually wanted to be more integrated in the warrior in you.
Yeah, totally.
That's all it was, man.
Yeah.
But the way it was expressing was in this way, because almost in some way you were denying it.
Mm-hmm.
You were denying the fact that there's
Yeah.
a warrior that wants to be acted out.
Yeah. Yeah. And at that time I was doing lots of space holding for people. I was working in hospitals. I was doing that. I was also going through a grief process. So it was very tender, very soft. And at some point there was a part of me that was like, fuck all that softness. Just go and fuck in something, whatever.
Sure.
Right? And it's dominate the world again, because that's also part of me.
Good.
And
Yeah.
it's like very unhealthy to like bring that to porn or to like paid sex or like to bring it to my partner, because that's really not a loving place.
Yeah.
So it fits very well in a boxing ring.
I appreciate you saying that. It demonstrates that, like, these aspects of us, it speaks to the fragmentation again
Yeah.
that we've experienced, and we're just looking for wholeness, man.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, that's what it's about, man. And I think this is really the caveat that I want to provide within this whole entire conversation, that in some ways we become fragmented and we're just looking for some form of wholeness, right?
Mhm.
And I think if we can just claim these aspects back of ourselves, own like and appreciate the desires that we have in ourselves, right? Um, and learn to enact them in super consensual ways. I think that's really a way to go about this.
Yeah, agree.
Well, listen, man, like we're gonna be wrapping up in the next 5 to 10 minutes, but I wonder, is there anything within this conversation that you believe that we'd missed out that you think might be important?
Feels very feels very complete to me,
Yeah,
I would say. Feels very complete.
yeah. Cool, man. Well, there is another piece that came up for me. I think our sexuality is beautiful. I really believe it, man.
Lovely.
I've experienced fucking healing with sex. When it was like in the form of love, and when it was in the form of intimacy, when it was in the form of consent. I've experienced massive healing, man. Liberation, like integration of aspects of myself that I believe were so wrong, so rotten, so disgusting. So sex is fucking beautiful, man, and I'm so
Positive.
passionate about this topic. And I would just want men to like engage in it in a really clean way.
Comes back to owning the truth of the moment.
Yeah. Hmm. Well,
Something incredibly empowering in what you've just shared. Like, this is a
what do you
way
mean?
more, or the way more powerful position to own what it is that I really want.
Yeah.
Um, and it will just feel, and if I then get to have sex with someone, that will just feel so much better
Yes.
than like having created that like manipulative strategy and like it's actually not true. And,
Yeah.
that will just, yeah, will create such a so much better feeling
Yeah.
in the inside of the body.
100% agreed. Well, bro, this was an epic conversation. I really hope the listeners as well got a lot of value out of it. And it was a bit of a different dynamic as well, I noticed as well within this conversation. I noticed myself getting a lot more bold and a lot more conversational around sharing something. So thank you as well for creating the space for me as well to just share some of those things.
You, man.
Thank you as well for being like willing to share some like new and tender stuff as well for you, and like just being bold and like, just being a demonstration of like, hey, like just showing yourself. People might judge you for the fact that you watch porn or whatever.
That's fine. That's fine. I just made the commitment with myself to not do anything
Yeah.
that I wouldn't share publicly. Um, so yeah, whatever it is that I do, I'm open about that.
Yeah.
I'm not. I had a history of hiding stuff. I'm not going back there.
Yeah.
And yes, that might trigger some people, and
Yeah.
that's fine as well.
Nice, man. Well, listen, man, I'm super proud to call you one of my best friends, and just love having this conversation with you. So thank you for being on. Maybe in a minute or two, just to close things off, for anyone who has listened in, who's gotten a lot of awareness around this, who really wants to change something, step back into integrity, wants to step in deeper truth again, where would you want in individuals to start? Like, where's the first place that you would guide an individual into to step on this journey?
If I can afford it, I would always start working with a professional, a coach that ideally has some sort of embodiment practice as well. Because especially when we're dealing with, let's say, these type of behaviors, maybe even addictive patterns, just the mind work won't do it. So ideally, you find a coach that can work with you on a mind and embodied level. If that's not available due to lack of funding, find a good men's group.
Yep.
And start reading. And if you find yourself, I would say, in a situation where, let's say, you're trapped in addictions around sex, I highly recommend reading Gabor Mate, because that content can, at least inside of me, it initiated compassion for myself.
Beautiful.
So just a few ideas here.
Love that, man. Yeah, let's leave it here. Brotherhood, men's groups, feeling compassion for or, challenges. Working with a professional. Yeah. All things that were super important as well on my journey. All right. Well, listeners, I hope you got a lot of value out of this conversation. Such conversations aren't as edgy anymore to share on this podcast, but for me, it is really a demonstration, I guess, of my commitment to really be there and to really go into those spaces and be bold and share what needs to be shared to really be of support. So I hope you received a lot of value out of this. As always, if you feel like someone could receive value from this conversation, feel free to pay it forward. And until next time, signing out. Thank you for listening to this episode. Your time and attention is truly appreciated. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to subscribe to stay tuned for my upcoming episodes. And in case you know somebody who would find this episode helpful, I encourage you to pay it forward. Finally, if you've personally been receiving value from the show, one way you're able to support this podcast is by leaving a 5-star rating and a written review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Not only does this help more people find the show, but it also supports me in bringing more incredible guests on for the future. I'm your host, Alex Lehman, and until next time, signing off.